Okay. This is my first meeting and the first committee meeting for the Council Operations, Intergovernmental Relations, and Public Transportation. So welcome. I want to officially call the meeting to order. Janine, would you please take the roll?
Calling the roll, Ms. Baker.
Here.
Ms. Simon. Here. Mr. Hauser.
Here.
Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones is absent. Mr. Miller. Here. There is a quorum.
Thank you. Are there any public comments related to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair. First is Rich Raphael. I'm sorry, you want to do non-agenda. Ms. Lou.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm very glad this meeting finally happens. Then the first one in this year, we had actually a nice day, not raining much. And important thing is now it's the time for us to do another charter review. The reason I took interest into this particular thing, that's because from my experience, I realized lots of offices in the county departments are there for all the good reasons, but sometimes they don't function properly. So through this particular events, I started learning important things. For example, I found out that Inspector General is really important for all of us, but up to now, Charter hasn't really give its rightful place as an independent entity to investigate, and all departments has response to it. And it doesn't matter who's in that office, and we want to know for sure that some of the mistakes happened in the past will not happen again. For example, the recent one, last Tuesday, we heard all the heartbreaking stories about licensed social worker working in the DCFS, which is a government department. And not only the 45 children died, we know right now, actually the number is way bigger, because if you push back, that could be 145, 1,045. And the people didn't die are still suffering. Lots of them are end up in the homeless system already, no matter what age. For these long-term suffering, if we had somebody who could catch those things for us in the past, probably some of the cases could have been prevented. So I hope this will actually happen. But right now in their meetings, this probably will be the last item they will discuss. But I truly hope this will come up in a positive way to help all of us, so we can start preventing all the unfortunate events or incidents and really strengthen up all our powers to help everybody in the county. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments related to the agenda?
The other persons are for the end.
And for the after? All right, then we'll move ahead. I know that we may not have been here for the minutes from the September 19th, 2017 meeting, but we do still need to approve them. So I will move to approve the minutes from the September 19th meeting, if I may have a second. Thank you. All agree?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are passed. There are no matters referred to committee, but we do have some very interesting discussion items today, which I'm pleased to bring to council. Today we have as our first speaker, Joe Calabrese, who is the CEO and General Manager of RTA, and he's going to give us an update of what's going on there at the Regional Cleveland Transit Authority. Please come forward.
Thank you. It's certainly my pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. And Dale, I certainly want to thank you for your work on the committee that met all last year. It was great work, and I certainly want to tell you we're working to implement many of the recommendations that came out of that committee. As I mentioned, I'm Joe Calabrese with RTA. I want to give you an overview and certainly be here to answer any questions you have. There are some packets around with some additional information for you and a brief copy of my remarks. As you're aware, the county has 3 appointments on the RTA Board of Trustees, Sunny Nardi, Karen Gabrielle Moss, and Gary Norton. I have several of my staff people here today with me. Jose Feliciano Jr., who was a member of the committee that Dale hosted last year, Eric Johnson, hopefully you know Eric. If there's a problem, Eric is your first go-to person. If he doesn't solve the problem quickly, let me know. But I'm always available to you as well. Joel Freilich is here as well. Joel is our brain trust. Joel is the person who develops the routes, develops the schedule, does a phenomenal job with his staff. And again, I brought Joel. If you have any specific questions, he will answer those questions for you. RTA connects the dots in Northeast Ohio. Our mission is to provide safe, reliable, clean, and courteous public transit to its customers. We take that mission very seriously. Our vision is to be the transportation choice for those with a choice, and even more importantly, the lifeline for those who don't have a choice and for whom RTA is the only travel option. We serve about 150 to 180,000 people on the typical weekday. Our buses and trains served our customers for 220 million miles last year. We have approximately 500 buses on 54 bus routes with over 4,000 daily departures, to and from 6,000 bus stops and over 1,100 shelters. 14 of our 54 bus routes operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. On the rail side, we have the only passenger rail system in Ohio. Some portion of the Shaker Rapid date back to 1913. We have 75 rail cars that operate to and from 52 stations, over 75 miles of track, and the trains are typically in service about 20 hours a day. We have about 2,400 employees, about 86% are unionized. A small portion of our service, primarily those that provide our service for people with disabilities, is provided through 3 separate subcontracts. We have the second largest police force in the county, about 140 people strong. The RTA's TSA-funded canines not only patrol RTA's infrastructure, but assisted bomb threats in 25 separate communities last year, so they really are a community asset. Recently, employers have made the connection between public transit and attracting and retaining workers. We have all read about the Amazon HQ2 search. We know that's not coming here, but I'm pleased to report that our staff did work with Amazon on the 2 fulfillment centers locally to be sure they have good public transit connectivity. Many in our community believe that RTA should provide more service than it does today. I am first on that list. It's important to note, however, for comparison purposes, RTA serves more customers every day than the next 2 largest transit systems combined, those in Cleveland and in Columbus and in Cincinnati. We also have the most productive system in the state. For every hour a bus is on the road, we serve 25 customers. Every hour a train is on the tracks, we serve 66 customers. Where are people going on RTA? 60% of all our trips are work-related, 23% are school-related, and 9% are healthcare-related. When people say, isn't there too much RTA service? I said, should we cut out taking people to work, to school, or to healthcare? 3 really, really important things. About 55% of our customers use RTA because they want to. They have the means to drive if they so choose. About 45% of RTA customers use us because they have no choice. We are their wheels. We are their way to get around, very importantly. RTA is also an important cog in economic development in our region. Entertainment and tourism, we're blessed by having 4 sports teams downtown, and it's very important for RTA to be in existence to deliver people to their gates. I know this Sunday we have the Monsters and the Indians both playing at the same time, something that really is great for us, and we're all geared up for the Tribe opener on Friday. Major events like the International Children's Games, the Senior Games, and the RNC would not be happening in Northeast Ohio if there wasn't a strong RTA. And over 30% of the attendees to the International Film Festival travel to that festival by RTA. I know you're aware of the MCO sales tax put a $20 million hole in our budget. That's about 7% of our operating budget, and unfortunately something we simply can't absorb. At the same time, people are asking us to do more and not less. We lobbied hard in Columbus with the help of the county, with the help of the County Commissioners Association, for a permanent replacement to the MCO sales tax. We weren't successful with that, but through a lot of bipartisan effort, we were able to get about $28 million of what I'll call soft landing money at the end of the year, so that $20 million cliff is still there. We're able to push it out a little bit. Additionally, we had a very good year at RTA financially. Last year, we finished the year $24 million better than budget. So again, that gives us a little breathing room until we try to figure out how to solve this MCO sales tax issue. The RTA board updated its governance in January of this year. They now have a committee devoted to advocacy and public outreach, chaired by Valerie McCall, and they'll be looking at various alternatives to bring more revenue in to RTA. In early January, I sent a letter to council talking about our financial situation and about the March 11th service changes that were implemented on March 11th. That service change did a couple things. Number one, it did save us some money, about $4 million a year, which was about 20% of the loss to the MCO sales tax issue, but it also provided greater connectivity to many important employment centers in Northeast Ohio, a mission we take very, very important. The RTA board did pass a supplemental budget on March 27th to take into account the loss of revenue from the MCO sales tax. And that budget does not reduce any transit service for the rest of 2018. And it also defers a fare increase that was scheduled to go into place this August. We want to do a very comprehensive fare study before a fare increase is implemented. We are very concerned over what a fare increase will do to lower income individuals. We know of a couple cities around the regions around the country where, although all fares are subsidized, are further subsidizing fares for people of low income. We'd love to work with people locally to make that happen. We alone can't do it. I can't decide what people can pay when the door of the bus or train opens up, but working, I think, with other social service agencies, we maybe come up with a plan to further subsidize those individuals so they can get to work, school, and on health care. RTA does make periodic changes to its schedules about 3 or 4 times a year. We make those changes to provide better service to our customers, and their input is very important in doing that. On April 26th, in a few weeks, we'll hold our first quarterly service planning open house. This was an idea first launched by Cleveland for Public Transit. I want to thank them for that idea, which was a very good one, but we'll be having quarterly meetings at RTA offices, both at noon and 5:30, to have the public come in and tell us what we should be considering for future changes to our service. So something we're very, very pleased about. We're not sitting on our hands waiting for a funding source to come around, but we're doing better things more cost effectively and using new technology. In 2016, we launched our real-time app where customers can do their trip planning and actually follow their bus or train. We also launched our mobile ticketing program where you can buy your fares right on the phone. That's going very, very well. Increased revenue through that program every month since we started it. Just last month, we launched a new version of our trip planning software and work with the county and a lot of social service agencies to highlight places people of low income might need to go to for RTA service to better help them plan their trip. In 2017, we launched our van share program, again, a van pool program that people in the county can take advantage of if they don't live on an RTA bus route. The van pool is available for people who live in the county, even if they're going outside the county, or people outside the county if they're going to jobs inside the county. We want to extend our reach. We are providing some subsidy to that to make it a very cost-effective alternative to people who just can't use RTA but don't want to drive their car alone. On April 2nd, just this week, we launched a pilot program with Lyft to provide better and lower cost service to paratransit customers. Later this year, we'll provide a transit on demand program. We're doing the simulations right now where buses on regular routes or in regions will be able to deviate through an Uber type app to go pick them up closer to their home site or their work site. So we're trying to do a lot of different things. In your packet, there's our legislative agenda. I just got back from Washington last week. We have good bipartisan support in the House and Senate there. Just received a couple of calls as I was waiting for this meeting from our federal legislators announcing a $2.7 million grant we just received to upgrade our Triscuit facility to have CNG fueling, a service there, which will save us a lot of money and it'll be really great for us. We talked at the committee about funding and about how the state is the state of Ohio is one of the worst funders of public transit in the nation. And updated figures from that show that our 63 cents per capita that we get from Ohio compares to our neighboring states of like population Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Illinois, they average $140 per capita to our 63 cents. There's also a report in there that the state did, that ODOT did, saying that the state should increase its funding for public transit from 0.7% to 10%. Unfortunately, the state has not accepted the results of their own study, and funding again went down a little bit through the current budget process. There's one statewide study going on that I'm participating in for transit funding. We hope that study will be important to the next governor and the next legislature. We feel the upcoming state of Ohio election cycle is a critical time to advocate and lobby for more funding for public transit. And let's face it, it can't get any worse. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for the invite. I'd love to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you. Go right ahead with questions.
Thank you. First, I want to thank you for everything you're doing at RTA. I know you're doing everything you can to salvage this mini crisis. But I just have a follow-up. You said that some people ask, is there too much RTA? I thought I heard you say that.
Yes.
Like who would ever ask that?
Well,
I mean, where's that coming from?
There are some people that don't understand. I think it's really education, lack of understanding over what we do. And again, I say with people to work, school, or healthcare,
Right.
which of those isn't important? So again, we know we need and again, at a time when we want to do more, this $20 million hole is going to make it very difficult even to get back to where we were last year. So there is a real misunderstanding, I think, over the value of public transit. People think the solution to economic development is not just a lot of parking, but a lot of free parking. And again, progressive cities that are doing really, really well in this country really know that that's not the solution. We need to take all those surface parking lots and make them multi-story office buildings and residential facilities. That's what really works for economic development into the future.
You said you were partnering with Lyft to help with the paratransit.
Yes.
What about Uber? Is that cutting into your somehow impacting your bottom line as well? That people
I think Uber and Lyft are impacting a very small amount. I don't think it's very significant. I think it's greater in other cities. We talked at the committee in Chicago that they put a fee on Uber, every Uber and Lyft ride to help fund Chicago Transit Authority. So I think there's partnerships. I think there's opportunities to partner together, again, through this program with Lyft. And working with Lyft, because Uber was very difficult to work with. Okay, Lyft seemed much more responsive to our request. But again, if a paratransit individual now, our typical cost to provide a paratransit ride is about $40 per ride. So under this pilot program, if they call through this program, if they call Lyft, and it's a pilot program right now, we've selected about 50 customers to try this. They'll pay their $2.75 regular fare. RTA will pay the next $12. And based on what we know, probably that would cover 99% of all the trips the paratransit covers. So the cost to provide that ride for us will go from $40 to roughly $12. And because of that, we can simply provide more service to more people. So it's a way to use new technology to deliver a better product and a more cost-effective product to help more in the future.
And lastly, this gap is significant, and the only way to close this gap would be perhaps is the state really who holds the purse strings on this. Is that correct?
Well, I think the state has the biggest opportunity simply because they're underfunding it to the extent they are. So, I mean, there's a lot of potential there. If they can go from 63 cents per capita to $5 or $10 per capita, which is still, much, much less than typical states that have the ridership we do, that would go a long way. So,
Well, we're not going to get direct federal dollars. I think you have a grant you said you're getting, but it's not something, the funding comes through the state to RTA, as I understand it.
we do get direct federal dollars, but all the federal dollars are capital dollars. So we do get money every year to help replace buses, to help do infrastructure repairs, things like that. When we go to the gas station and gas up our car, there's a federal gas tax on that. I think it's 18.6 cents. That was established in 1993, not raised since then. 20% of that goes to public transit, 80% of that goes to highways. So there's there's a funding mechanism. It's really needs to be modified and updated because it doesn't do it. Really now it funds about 40% of infrastructure costs, but there's been a lot of talk and a lot of entities you would not think, like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is proposing, they've got to increase the federal gas tax to do as a pay for all the infrastructure projects that we know we need as a nation. So that's that opportunity. Again, that's capital money. The best systems are ones where you've got federal, state, and local. We have the local piece. We're missing the state piece.
And that was my question. Thank you.
Good to see you, Joe. To echo Councilwoman Simon, thank you so much for all the work you're doing at
Thanks
the
for your
RTA.
support.
And especially the 2018 fare increase. You guys were able to delay that. I was just wondering, how long do you think we have until we have to address that issue again?
Well, I think we'll have to address that issue as we start putting our budget together for next year. Really hoping that we see some movement or some optimism. I don't know that we're going to have anything definitive. Again, I'm putting a lot of hope, which may be misdirected in the new governor and the new state budget. I think we need to see what's happening there. Again, we're going to be doing this fare study. There might be a different way to configure our fares. You know, we want full buses and trains. That's the first thing. If we can fill empty seats, if the county can help us through regulations and planning and zoning, and you know, let's encourage people to use public transit, not encourage them to drive their cars. I think just little things like that go a long way. Also, we need to be more productive. You know, and public transit is productive when I can increase the speed of throughput of my buses and trains. So again, we need to look at opportunities like the Health Line on Euclid Avenue, where before it took me 28 bus drivers to go up and down Euclid Avenue, and I provide better service with 16. So it's a way for me to provide better service at lower cost. I think we've got to look at those opportunities as well.
Follow-up question. I took a look at the 2018 budget, and you guys did a great job, especially with no additional service costs. Just wondering, as far as the board chair, Joe, where are we at with finding a new board chair?
Well, the board did defer its annual meeting election of officers until I think it's May 1st. So again, they will be deciding then. There's a nominating committee to nominate, and then they'll have an election.
Please keep us updated. Again, thank you for all your
will.
great work,
Thank you
Joe.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councilman Miller.
Madam Chair, Director, first of all, I'd like to thank you for all the support and cooperation you and your staff gave us during the committee process last year. You were constantly available, and we could not have accomplished as much as we did without that partnership. So I appreciate it very much. My question is, given the temporary lifeline and the favorable budget results that you have last year, how long could you maintain the status quo under the current circumstances?
Yes, Dale, thank you, and thank you for starting the ball rolling last year with that committee. Again, I think I can buy a year, you know, and that's really what I told the board. Our goal, I'm not sure what the county policy is, but you know, my burn rate is about $20 million. My burn rate is about $22 million a month. We like to have an ending balance of at least 1 month's operating reserve. That's our goal because of, again, the supplemental money from the state and the fact that we did perform better than budget last year. We will finish this year with, I budgeted about $27 million, a little more than 1 month's operating reserve. But we go down to, you know, single digits next year. So, you know, we need to make some decisions, need to do something. The last thing I want to be doing is talking about service cuts and fare increases next year. But we bought a year, and the goal is to use that year as productively as possible. If we don't have something, quote unquote, in the bank, I want to be in a good direction.
Are there any opportunities for cost savings through new technology, or have we exacted what's available in that area?
Well, I think there is. Some of the things that I mentioned before is saving us some money. It's certainly not immediate. It takes a major investment to do some of those things. Again, more exclusive bus lanes, you know, could save us some money from a productivity perspective. But by the time we go through all the zoning approval processes, you know, things like that take several years to develop. That's probably the one single thing. We have a new communication system that we receive federal grant money for that'll be installed this year. But Gail, these are things around the edges. We can save 50,000 here or 100,000 there, which are all very, very important. But we need to first replace the $20 million loss, which is the same issue the county has, and then look at what do we do now to really improve and extend the RTA reach to help more people get to critical services.
I know it's one time and probably all capital, but are you going to be able to access anything from the Volkswagen settlement?
We are looking at that. Certainly, we are on the list. I hope we will. Again, that capital is very important. The other thing really which relates to the Volkswagen settlement and your previous question is, with the CNG fueling station, I mentioned we did receive some grant funding. Good news about a few minutes ago. We're replacing our older diesel fleet with compressed natural gas buses, and with that we are saving a lot of operating costs. A natural gas bus is about $40,000 more to purchase, but over the life of the vehicle will save $200,000 in fuel costs. So again, things that will help us in the future using new technology. The next wave of that, which probably will be, it's not quite ripe today, people are talking about it, but I'm assuming that the CNG buses we buy today will be replaced with electric buses in 8 to 10 years from now, which again will save us money to operate them. They're much more expensive to buy, and now we've got to go through a whole different fueling process. It's not, you can't plug them into the 110 outlet. It's a major electrical fueling and electrical draw process. But we're always looking for new technology to provide better service at lower cost.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilman. Just a couple questions I have for you. The MCO sales tax, that was a result of that loss because we no longer can charge sales tax on Medicaid services. So not only did it expand to RTA, but it was also a loss for the state as a whole. I think there's some thought that the state just cut dollars because they didn't want to fund, these different programs, but it's really because they were cut because of the sales tax that no longer was allowed. Is that's the way you understand it?
Kind of.
Okay.
Medicaid, I think the same situation occurred in Ohio and 7 or 8 other states. Medicaid said, we will no longer pay sales tax on managed healthcare services paid for by Medicaid unless all managed healthcare was attributable to sales tax.
That's right.
I understand all of the other states applied sales tax to all managed healthcare. This is the only state that did not. So there was that loss. It was very significant. It was about $500 million to the state, about $200 million to the counties in the state, about $38 million to the 8 public transit systems that received sales tax. 20 of that $38 million was ours. But again, importantly, the state did raise other fees to compensate itself for the $500 million loss and told the counties and transit systems, go solve this problem locally.
It's definitely a loss, and I certainly understand that. Perhaps the argument might be to raise or to contemplate all medical services, not just Medicaid.
Or if that came out of what I call the sales tax bucket, what can we reasonably put into the sales tax bucket to compensate? And the other concern that I think we all share, the state, the county, and RTA, is the proliferation of internet sales that is really eating into our sales tax locally. Not that everyone wants to pay taxes, but this is money that goes to very important critical services. So that's something that needs to be addressed at some level, that every year more and more of that money is not being collected. And I think it's a disadvantage and disservice to local businessmen and women who have their establishments and employ our local people. Now people are able to bypass that store and buy stuff cheaper on the internet.
I certainly would not have an argument with that. It does seem unfair that the same product is taxed in one location with bricks and mortar and not when it's bought online. So, thank you for that. The 55% of RTA's customers using RTA is a choice. Is there any thought when you get together and brainstorm about how we can increase perhaps those that use RTA, to increase those that use it as a choice. That those they may or may not need it, they use it because it's perhaps more convenient, inexpensive over the vehicle that they may own. How, do you ever think about how we can get that 55% up higher as a percentage?
Dan, we think about it every day. Let me thank the county. The county is on the forefront of doing that. Several years ago, as the county is moving into this building, they started to subsidize county employees. I think it's to the tune of $38 per month. And guess what? County employee participation in RTA rose. So that is really important. Again, many employers don't think twice about, I'm going to subsidize parking for my employees, but don't think about, I want to do the same thing or be fair and subsidize public transit to the same level.
Right.
We have about 1,000 employers in the region that provide some level of benefit to their employees who use public transit. There's a federal parking benefit and a federal transit benefit where they can buy passes through payroll deduction, which helps. We're always trying to encourage more and more people to use that. But again, to encourage them to provide some incentive. I go to meetings too often. I'll walk into a meeting and say, can I validate your parking? And I say, oh, can you validate my bus pass? So it's just a different mental thought process that we need to try to encourage. We need to tell people it's okay to use public transit. It's not just for those who don't have another choice. And again, how do we leverage the 55%?
Right, thank you, and it's good to hear that you do, and
I think, if I can, just one more thing, really important to note that in Columbus, they're doing something somewhat unique, and other cities have done this as well, but Columbus is kind of like Ohio, where they're providing this summer free bus pass for everyone who works in downtown Columbus. Again, the reason is not because they love public transit. The reason is they can't attract businesses to downtown Columbus because they don't have any more parking. So if they could move people from driving and parking to public transit, free up existing parking spaces, they can attract more people to the city. Again, something we need to think. Other cities are thinking about that. We need to be innovative as well.
as you have your community meetings and you're talking to other business, that would probably be a very good suggestion to make, and keep repeating the value of RTA as it gets their employees from one place to another, and the incentives that could follow it, just for the reasons you gave.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions from our council? All right. Well, thank you very much for your presentation.
I'm always here for you. Again, it'd be great to do this periodically to give you updates at your invitation. I will always be here.
Great.
Thank
And
you
this
much.
is, has been now a part of this committee instead of a standalone. So we are certainly interested in what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we are now going to hear from Michael King, who is a member of the Charter Review Committee, to give us an update on what the Charter Review Commission is doing. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. Michael King, council staff, and member of the Charter Review Commission. I was asked to come here today to provide you an update on the status of how our meetings are going and what all of you can expect coming later this summer for potentially placing charter amendments on the ballot. So, as you're all aware, the Charter Review Commission is a 9-member body established by the county charter to develop and recommend charter amendments for recommendation or for consideration by county council. And as the county's foundational document, the charter informs everything we do. So the first commission was appointed back in 2012, which recommended various amendments. I think there were about 15, many of which have been since been adopted by the voters. The current commission was appointed last summer and confirmed by council. And we as the commission had our organizational meeting last September and will submit our proposals to council per the charter by July 1st of this year. The next Charter Review Commission won't be appointed until 2027 and then every 10 years thereafter. So while council always retains the right to put amendments on the ballot, we'll not go through this particular process for another 10 years. The current members of the Charter Review Commission are Judge Ronald Adrien from Cleveland Municipal Court, Fiscal Officer Dennis Kennedy, myself, we're the two county members, county representatives, Diane Downing from Huntington, former Mayor Susan Drucker from Solon, Mayor Tom Persiak from Strongsville, Claire Rosaco from Tri-C, Victor Ruiz from Esperanza, and Davida Russell, who is a representative of ASME. So at the Charter Review Commission's organizational meeting last year, the commission elected Judge Adrian as the chair and Dennis Kennedy as vice chair. And the first order of business we set up was to establish a process to allow the public and key stakeholders to submit charter proposals, providing the commission sufficient time to deliberate and refine those proposals. Accordingly, the county issued a press release asking for proposals in October, and we held a number of hearings throughout November and December, and where the public was provided an opportunity to present their ideas. This January, we met to set a standard set of criteria to review and prioritize those proposals, and ultimately, the commission chose to narrow its focus to 4 topics for further consideration. And those topics are, first, clarifying the roles of the Department of Human Resources and the Personnel Review Commission. Second, the process by which council and executive succession takes place in the event there's a vacancy. Third, campaign finance generally. Fourth, codifying the Agency of Inspector General into the charter. And as many of you know, a number of these are topics that were raised after the last Charter Review Commission, and we're currently going through the process of doing a deeper dive. So we're meeting, the commission meets roughly once a month. We've met actually yesterday, and we're meeting again tomorrow to do a deeper dive on some of these items. So to date, we've held hearings to discuss the first 2 topics, so the Department of Human Resources and the PRC, and the council and executive succession. As for the Department of Human Resources and PRC, I believe both HR and PRC have agreed and submitted a joint proposal that they are recommending the commission to consider, and we made some minor changes with their agreement. And actually just yesterday, we voted to, in principle, accept and recommend that proposal. It will be more formally codified in the Commission's final report that'll be sent over in July, but I'd be happy to share with you in principle what has been recommended. Just yesterday, we did a deeper dive on the issue of council and executive succession, and this was actually a proposal recommended to the Charter Review Commission by Councilman Miller. So he's been at all the meetings and has been very actively involved in brainstorming ideas on how to improve the current process. And we haven't landed on a particular proposal just yet, but I think we're making good progress. Tomorrow we'll be discussing campaign finance, and next month we'll be talking about codifying the Inspector General into the charter. So we haven't really done a deep dive into those topics just yet. Some of the other proposals that were submitted but weren't recommended for further review include nonpartisan elections, where open primaries would be held and the top 2 would move on to the general, similar as to how it works in the city of Cleveland. Open primaries with party affiliation, so it would be again an open primary, but people could put a party affiliation next to their name on the ballot, and then again the top 2 would move on to the general. Shifting the county back to having an elected sheriff from an appointed sheriff. And then a proposal dealing with how the Personnel Review Commission deals with some of its hearing officers, whether they are employees of the county or independent contractors. And each of these amendments was basically deprioritized for various reasons, and some of the criteria we used to determine that was based on whether or not a prior Charter Review Commission had looked at it, whether there had been changed circumstances, and whether the charter was the appropriate place to deal with some of these issues. Because in at least one case, I think there are probably other areas, whether through council legislation or some type of administrative rule, that it might be more appropriate to handle that. So looking forward into the process over the next few months, as I mentioned, by July 1st, the Charter Review Commission will submit its proposals to council along with a report of its activities, after which council is required to vote on each proposal within 60 days after they're received. The filing deadline to get charter amendments on the ballot to the Board of Elections is September 7th. And based on the current meeting calendar, council will need to vote to send charter amendments to the ballot by its August 14th meeting, unless a special meeting is scheduled, in order to meet that filing deadline. And of course, as in any other year, council also has the opportunity to place its own amendments on the ballot, but again has to meet that September 7th deadline. So that's basically the update, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much. Sounds like you've been very busy. in the commission. Any questions from my council colleagues? I guess the only question I would have for you is, because you're only in a deep dive on two, and it's good to see that the PRC and Human Resources have come together. I haven't been here that long, but I hear that's been a struggle, so that's good to hear. Any concern about staying on task? Any concern about meeting the deadlines of the July deadline to us so that we can take it and continue with approving?
Yes, actually, that was an issue that from the very start, this Charter Review Commission was cognizant of. The last Charter Review Commission, which I was not on but played sort of a support role with, ended up in a situation where they had 15 charter amendments they were considering in concept, and ended up with basically 3 weeks at the end in which to draft all of them.
Wow.
and finalize language. So this commission has put together a very deliberate approach where we're dealing with each issue one at a time. Again, first we prioritize them,
Right.
then we're dealing with each issue one at a time, and sort of as we go, we're working to finalize language as quickly as possible so that we do provide enough time and enough sort of due diligence on each amendment so that we can meet that July deadline.
That's good to know, and good to know that it's narrowed to 4 does make it more workable and giving you the chance to really investigate each topic. If there are no questions, thank you for your update, and we look forward to hearing more.
Thank you very much.
All right, our final speaker, last but not least, of course, is the Agency of Inspector General, the semi-annual report from July 1st, 2017 to December 31st, 2017. Mr. Mark Griffith, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of council. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak today. This is the required presentation for our semi-annual report, but I want to say that I am always here and would be delighted to come back at any time to speak with you, but also to speak with you outside of chambers as well, because I'm pleased and proud to talk about what my office has done. I'm also pleased that we're here in open forum where members of the public, Ms. Liu and others, can come and comment, because at the end of the day, sunlight is the best disinfectant. And my office is committed to transparency and sunlight at all respects. And so as part of that, I hope you'd let me speak a little bit about what my office has done in the last 6 months to promote that transparency, and also to talk about how that fits into context with what the office has done over the last 3 years. I've prepared a PowerPoint, and I don't know if we can get that up on the screen or not. But this is simply a copy of what we have done in the past. And we are one of 3 oversight entities that were created independently, the PRC, Internal Audit, and my office. But you are in many ways the 4th, and perhaps the most important of all, as a separate independent branch of government. Not only are you here for oversight, but you're also here to watch the watchers. And so I'm here very happy to be part of that. Help me, how do I move through this? Oh. Spacebar? Great. So my office essentially works into 3 primary categories. We have investigations, we provide ethics opinions, and we provide compliance. And I think generally what people want to hear most about are the investigations, understandably. We have 7.5 full-time employees that we split between these, but I would ask that you give my indulgence to move through these in the opposite order, because I know investigations are something that we want to talk about, particularly at the end, and yet compliance is important as well. So I'm going to try to move quickly through about 10 slides with respect to what we do in terms of our compliance obligations that are given to the office as part of our ordinance. One of the things that takes up a lot of our time, and which is very important, are contractor registrations and background checks. Because we come out of a history of questionable issues in the county in the past, my office conducts a rigorous background check for every county contractor. Currently, there are 2,266 registered contractors. We also do this for registered lobbyists. But as part of our background check, we also want to make sure that those we do business with are current on their taxes. And so in the last 6 months, we identified $1.2 million in unpaid taxes that are owed by contractors to Cuyahoga County. And this is a little bit of a change over the years. And in part, that's because of the change in the laws with respect to registration. When the Inspector General's office was first created, everyone who simply bid on a proposal was required to register. So whether you got it or not, you were required to be registered and undergo a background check. And that was a 4-year registration process. So in 2016, those started to drop off. And so we've gone now from 3,600 to about 2,200 registered contractors whom we review and conduct background checks on. We also look at lobbyists, and again, some of this is due to the fall off in the registration process. We had 26 registered lobbyists in 2015. We're down to about 20 at this point. Another important factor that we've had in terms of response is to make sure that anyone who has secondary income is disclosed to the county. So it's been relatively constant at this level from 408 to about 412, up and down a little bit. During the second half of every year, we always get more as people seek seasonal employment in order to earn money for Christmas or the holidays. We also have specific issues where we review for conflicts of interest, and we have specific policies that we look at with respect to sheriff's deputies who want to moonlight and provide security, prosecutor's office where they have independent law firms, the Board of Revision as well. So we look at those to make sure there are no conflicts of interest. 95% of them are fairly routine and straightforward. They're looking to earn extra money as an Uber driver, working at Subway, that sort of thing. But it's the remaining few percent that take up a lot of time with respect to that. Another responsibility that my office is tasked with is reviewing the driver's license records of all county employees who may drive in the course of county business. And this is usually where I say something snarky, like you would not believe that we had a county executive who spent 10 years without a valid license. But in fact, it's really a serious issue because employees who are driving in the course of their business for the county can expose the county to risk of liability if they get into an accident. And so we're required by ordinance twice a year to review the driver's license abstracts of those employees who drive in the course of business. And in the last 6 months, we looked at 1,861 driver's license abstracts, and 18 raised issues of concern. So about 1/10 of 1%, or maybe it's 1%. This is why I went to law school, to avoid the higher math. But the majority of those were people who had been suspended during a period of time, either because, and I apologize, that doesn't come up on the screen very well, either because it simply expired on their birthday or because they were suspended for other reasons. And in speaking with council members, one of the questions was, gee, Mr. IG, what does your office do and what are the results of these? Because these can be serious questions. And so let me try to follow up on some of those questions. We found that 5 are currently under review. 1 had temporary driving privileges, so that was not a violation. 4 received verbal reprimands. 3, there are disciplinary procedures currently in progress. And then 5 simply didn't drive during the time in question. With respect to those who were driving during that time, they are subject to discipline, but also they're not allowed to be paid mileage during that period of time. We can't be paying people who were not permitted to drive. So it's my understanding that the county will seek reimbursement in those situations as well. We're also responsible for debarments. This has gone up and down as they come off the rolls. Normally we do about a dozen debarments per year. We had a spike in 2016 in response to non-payment of development loans. And one of the things that council asked me was, look, Inspector General, what is it that your office is doing about these people who owe the county money on their development loans? And we said, good point, and that accounts for the large number. In the coming year, 28 debarments will come off the list, and these are legacies from the original corruption scandal that are now going to be off the list. We'll have about 15 pending debarments at that time when those come off. Trying to move through these quickly. The second major part or category that we work on are ethics opinions. And those have increased from 56 per year in 2015 to 84. And my office regards this as a great thing because we want people reaching out to us to ask for our opinions, to ask for guidance before something occurs. And out of those ethics opinions, generally 75% we say we don't see a violation, we don't see an issue, and in approximately another 25% we say, no, you can't do that or you shouldn't do that. Ethics opinions are always given in advance. You can't come and ask us for an ethics opinion for something that's already occurred. They have to be prospective only. A few more things and then we'll get to investigations. We are not simply reactive, we want to be proactive. And one of the things that my office wants to do is to create a culture of compliance, and that has to do with ethics education. So we've initiated a series of regular ethics updates via email. And in the last 6 months of 2017, when we started this, we issued opinions that we thought were relevant for that period of time. So as we were getting into election season, we issued an ethics update on political activity. As we got into a period of time where people might seek seasonal employment, we issued an update on secondary employment. As we got closer to the holidays, we issued an opinion on holiday gifts and the prohibitions on receiving substantial gifts from improper sources. The last piece that I would say before I get to investigations is that we've also worked with the United States State Department to talk about how we've responded to corruption in Cuyahoga County. And one of the things that I always say is it will never end. Our process is always to continue to investigate and to work on it. And just as a police force never ends all crime, our role is to make sure that we continue to work and try to minimize ethical questions as much as possible. And so in the last 6 months of 2017, the United States State Department asked us to meet with delegations from the country of Belarus, from the country of Colombia, and then a mixed delegation from a variety of Latin American countries. And so we're very pleased to share with them both our successes and our struggles in trying to really change the culture of government in Cuyahoga County. And one of the things that I say to them and I say to you is 99% of county employees are outstanding. We really have a good group of county employees who care about the public. And as much as my office is in charge of being a watchdog, at the same time, we need to recognize how good our county staff really is. And at a very fundamental level, how they have an unfair reputation, I think, in some parts of the community. But when people think of the Office of Inspector General, they think about investigations. And our number of investigations has increased since 2015. We had 38 in that year, and we had 45 most recently. And one of the things that's happened is that we've tried to move the Office of Inspector General away from individual human resource complaints. We were often wrapped up in situations where one employee would complain about another and file a complaint with the Inspector General's office, and that would then undermine the line supervisors. So we've tried to strategically shift from single-person HR investigations to issues that are more systemic and broader and also focus on money and how can we really watch the taxpayers' dollars. So in the last 6 months, we have continued our process of looking at public contracts. And there were two particular issues that we spent a lot of time on. One was the issue of cost overruns, and the other was the issue of late contracts. Let me talk about both of those. There was an infamous wiretap of our former County Commissioner DeMora, where he indicated, you know what, I tell all my friends, come in low and then have amendments, and we'll simply have a cost overrun, and that's how you get your money. So one of the things that we wanted to look at was, is this continuing to be a problem? Have we made changes, and are we seeing significant cost overruns? And so, the way you eat an elephant is bite by bite. And so our first bite was on road and bridge contracts. And the question that we asked there was, are we having overruns on road and bridge contracts? Are we seeing this process of people coming in and then increasing with amendments and change orders? And so we looked at it at two levels. One was what the initial estimate is before it goes out to bid. And we found out that at the end of the day, 72% of road and bridge contracts actually came in under the initial estimates. Well, so that's the initial estimate. And one of the things that we tried to test on that is are you deliberately overestimating in order to make yourselves look good? And after reviewing that, we determined no, that they are legitimate estimates. But when they're put out for competitive bid, they come in generally under what was estimated. But then the next question is not just, well, what was the estimate, but how much does it actually come in when it's been bidded out? And we found that about 54% of road and bridge projects came in actually under the amount bid. And that tells me that Public Works is managing these efficiently. 10% come in actually at the amount of the bid. And I think the reality is people manage to their bids in some cases. And then 36% are over, and that is, of course, a concern. But we didn't find any consistency about why they were over. They each had individual reasons. There was not one contractor that was consistently over or any particular reason. Oftentimes it was just a bridge project where they didn't understand what was going on underneath the sublayer of the surface or others. And so we concluded from this that although we have to do better, 36% is more than taxpayers want, but Public Works is doing a pretty good job. And my staff said, we've never done a positive report before. Why are we doing that? And my reaction is because we want to be fair. But we also looked at an issue of timeliness of public contracts. And here there's really an opportunity for a lot of improvement because we're not doing as well as we should. Briefly, the total number of contracts has come down since 2014. That has to do with the county's policy of doing fewer bigger contracts rather than smaller contracts. But one of the things that we found was that a large number, an unacceptably large number of public contracts are being approved after the work has already begun. And so based on the data from the Office of Procurement and Development, we found, for example, that in 2016, there were 206 contracts in which the work had begun before it was actually finally approved. And for better or for worse, this is actually an improvement when you look at percentages. So in 2014, 43% of all contracts, according to OPD's data, were submitted late. That's down to a third, but it's still nowhere near the goals that OPD has of 10% being submitted late. There are always going to be some emergency contracts, a water main breaks, someone needs to be hospitalized. There will always be some percentage, but at 33%, we really need to do a lot better. The next piece with regard to watching taxpayer dollars that we've spent a lot of time on has to do with the Department of Development. And we issued a large report at the end of June of 2017, and we promised you that we would continue to follow up on this. We're not going to just give you a report and then walk away from it. So I'm happy to report that the Department of Development has really made real substantial improvements in this area. They have begun to implement many of the suggestions, and they've made a real difference. So just briefly, they have reviewed all of their loans for the last 10 years. Finally, we have written policies and procedures. We've conducted an inventory of the loans. We are entering them into the database. We're actually invoicing, finally, each and every loan on which there is a payment. So some of these are basic business practices that we weren't doing before, but we are now. I want to skip down to the last check mark, which is we've hired a professional portfolio manager. We now have really good staff at the Department of Development. Brian Edwards is outstanding, Greg Huth is outstanding, and they really have made a difference in terms of their professionalism, their responsiveness, and that in itself has made a difference. And in terms of money, so for example, the process that has gone forward as a result of looking at this has had real impact for taxpayers. There was a $3.6 million loan that we were not aware of, that we didn't have a record of, that was found in response to inquiries by the Auditor of State. Brian Edwards recalculated payments and found $86,000 for taxpayers from a single Department of Development loan. Director Ted Carter negotiated a $37,000 payment of late payments that previously had been ignored. And then we also identified funds that had been approved for loans but had never been spent. So there were $685,000 that had been set aside, which are now freed up for development. There's also an ongoing review by the Fiscal Office of bond and loan funds. So there are loans which I would not say were lost, but they hadn't been included in our process. And so we now have real improvements, but we're not done. So We still don't have a hard close. We are now posting our loans on the county website, but not as much information as we might like. So for example, you don't know which are late, which are in default, what are the outstanding balances. Registration and background checks are still not being done, but we hope to do that. So I really want to emphasize the progress that the Department of Development has made, but it also doesn't end. It's a journey, not a destination. And they have a very hard row to hoe because auditors tell me that it takes 4 to 10 times as much work to correct a bad entry or to correct the absence of an entry than to get it right the first time. And so that's what they're in the process of doing. And I would urge all of council to really support the portfolio manager and their efforts as well. Let me walk through some of the last few slides. We care about taxpayer dollars. We've managed our budget every year for the last 3 years under budget. We've kept fairly consistently around $700,000. Some of the surplus is because positions haven't been filled immediately because it's important that we get good people. So we'd rather have them vacant than otherwise. So I'm here for as long as you're willing to allow me to answer questions. And I want to thank you again for your time today.
Thank you for the overview of the semi-annual report. Do we have questions? Councilman Miller.
Madam Chair, Inspector General, I appreciate the work that you do and the report and I do think that the Inspector General's office should be included in the charter. I'm encouraging the Charter Review Commission to recommend that to the council. A couple of questions regarding the 52 that were debarred because of loan problems. How long were those debarments for?
I believe that those were 4-year debarments entered in 2012, and so they would have rolled off in 2016. No, I'm sorry, they were 5 years, so they're coming off now.
Oh, no, I'm talking about the ones done more recently in 2016 because of the loan problems.
Those were 3-year debarments. I'm sorry, I thought you were asking about the ones.
No.
My apologies. 3-year debarments.
So if they pay up, do we take them off debarment, or do they have to serve the 3 years regardless?
So far that hasn't been raised. My goal is to support payment. So what I would say to you is if they pay up, I will do everything to take them off immediately, because at the end of the day, our goal is not to be punitive. Our goal is to protect the taxpayers' dollars. So I would support taking them off for anyone who pays up.
And if they don't pay up, are we going to slap them with another debarment, or is 3 years going to be it for this particular offense, even if it's not corrected?
So the answer is on the debarment, 3 years is it for the particular offense, but with our new process of having them register with our office and having that part of the review, that's going to be part of their credit check. So I think that it is very unlikely that once you've been on the debarment list, you're going to get another loan from the county.
That's a good thing. My other question is regarding the late contracts. How can we start work on 33% of the contracts without a contract in place? I thought that if you don't have a contract in place, that in most cases it just has to be held up until there is a contract in place.
It is supposed to be. And I think there are two pieces to this. There are two sides to it. One is we have a real problem in our county with work starting first and the contract coming later. The numbers are also, our data needs to be improved. So we're doing this on the basis of data from OPD and what used to be by speed and others. And so sometimes the data does not get corrected. So I would say that number points to a problem on both sides. And I see this every week that I'm in the executive review part for contracts, and on any day that I sit in on the Board of Control, where contracts are coming in, and then those of you who sit on the Board of Control are faced with do I say no to this? And yet the work has already started. So in answer to your question, I think about how we can do better, it has to start, first of all, with management, which is people need to understand how long it takes it to get through the system and not permit work to start until that occurs. And then secondly, we need to improve the speed at which we move through the process.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Yes,
Thank you.
go ahead, Councilwoman.
So do you anticipate any appeals coming from any initiation of debarment letters?
I don't think so. You know, we have sent a handful out recently, and actually, I'll give you an example. So last year, we sent out 9, in the last 6 months, we sent out 9 letters. Of those, 3 did not respond at all, or they responded with reasons that we thought were unacceptable. And so I don't think those are going to be appealed. But then for the other 6, they came in and we talked through, you know, was the data correct? You know, can you get back into compliance with the county law? And so those were not, those didn't go beyond the notice of potential debarment stage. So in answer to your question, I don't think we're going to have many cases for the Debarment Review Board.
And so in terms of the lobbyist list that you have about 20, are those posted on the website?
I believe that they are.
They are, and they're kept current, supposed to be kept current with lobbyists putting their names in? Okay.
Yes.
All right. And I see that you've done a good job overseeing this loan collection issue, the economic development loans, and you were involved with
We're trying.
correcting this. But eventually, that's not your ongoing job, right?
Correct.
And at some point, somebody's going to have to take over that exercise to oversee this. And who do you envision taking over this role?
So let me first of all say that I really believe that the hiring of a professional portfolio manager is light years ahead of where we were. The individual who we have there now reviews every loan, he reviews every payoff number, and so that's the key piece. You know, I expect that we're going to continue to do update reports for council, but that we're going to continue to diminish and pull back. I also believe strongly that the posting of the loans and the transparency of the portfolio database, which now Fiscal has access to, is going to create more sunshine and more visibility that my hope is it will eliminate this process or eliminate these problems.
So speaking of transparency, if I may, one more question. All of our contracts, county contracts, are mandated to be posted. And I think this was Councilman Miller's legislation way back in the beginning of the new government. And I've not seen that being done. And there's a problem with that. And I'm wondering if the IG is going to get involved to make sure that
Yes.
that is in compliance.
Yes.
Okay.
Let me talk about that. I mentioned briefly in the same section of the ordinances, we asked that data be posted with regard to grants and loans. And the Department of Development has complied with the letter of that law, which is great because before, I think they posted it on January 18th of this year, we didn't even have that up. So then, you know, as I said, I'd like to see more information on loans, but then the next part of that ordinance is exactly what you pointed out, which has to do with contracts. And the answer to that is yes, we are going to look at that and you can expect a report on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? A couple of them for you, maybe a little more, some specifics on your PowerPoint. The unpaid taxes by contractors, the over 1 million that you've identified, how is that then compared to perhaps those same contractors wanting the Department of Development to consider more work? How do they know whether or not that is owed by that particular contractor, and do they collect before they give grants or long-term loans or low-interest loans, those type of things?
So let me first of all say, with respect to the Department of Development, I don't know.
Okay.
The number of 1.2 million is not just for development contractors, but it's all county contractors who registered with us during the last 6 months. So we have not matched. I am not aware that those are, and actually I think that those would not be development borrowers, because development borrowers at the end of 2017 didn't even go through the registration process. So that is now changing. So as I think about the system, none of the 1.2 million would arise out of development loan recipients.
That's good to know. Good, thank you. Let's see. The driver's license reviews, when someone is identified as being suspended, which means it could be a DUI, could be many different reasons, is that an immediate dismissal of driving? Do you know, is that different from an expiration where you forget to renew your license? There isn't perhaps a higher level of criminal activity, but if there is a suspended license or something that is a reason for that, how is that handled differently?
So it depends on what we mean or what the individual is doing when driving in the course of county business. So that includes not just people who have to drive regularly, like weights and measures officers or sheriff's officers, but also includes anyone who might have to go to a conference or a meeting who would then possibly bill the county for his or her travel time. So for those people,
Right.
they simply should not be driving. They need to find other means of transportation. For those whose job involves driving, that then goes to the supervisor to review and to make sure that that person does not drive during the course of his or her business. And sometimes that can result in a disciplinary review, as is going on with some particular individuals. And for others, it's a temporary transfer to another job.
Is the latter of what you just stated with those that are employees driving in county vehicles, are they in this 18 issues of concern?
Yes. So some of those 18 issues involve individuals who have to drive as part of their job.
Okay. And that is being managed seriously, in your opinion?
It depends on the department. And so what I would say to you is some departments have been fantastic, and other departments, I think need to look at the seriousness of it. And I say that because some of this is essentially retrospective. So we're looking at what happened in the prior 6 months, and some managers have said, well, it's over and done with, we're just going to move on. And others have said, no, this is a problem because you've exposed the county to risk.
Right. All right, good to know. Let's see, and I appreciate Councilman Miller's question on the timeliness of public contracts. Both of us have been on the Board of Control, which it is difficult to say no, but we do find it compromising to see many of those already enacted and being sometimes not paid. They don't have the authority to have them paid, but the vendors are waiting for their money. I heard your suggestions. That is, I appreciate that. And it is something I think we do need to be aware of and try to work harder in bringing some of those dates closer, at least, or even before the ask of money. So thank you for recognizing that, and we will be diligent in what we do in trying to reinforce it also. Can you please explain on the remaining issues on one of your last pages, the registration and background checks? That's a remaining issue.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure what you mean by that.
Sure. When you asked about the number of contractors who owed money to Department of Development, my answer to you was none, because up through the end of 2017, no borrowers had to register with my office. And since that time, Department of Development has committed to having borrowers register so we can conduct the background checks. That has not actually occurred yet, but they have indicated that they're going to do so in the future. And so we are working with fiscal and we're working with the Department of Development to fix that. But it is it's a remaining issue that I think is important.
Good. So that is, you have cooperation?
Yes.
Okay, so it's something perhaps in your next report?
Yes.
We would be hearing more about that. All right, if there are no other questions, as I've said earlier, I take your report seriously. I'm thankful that you're there and you're our eyes and ears out there, and having you come before us and give us your semi-annual report is important to us. So we will definitely have you back, and thank you for offering to answer any questions in the interim. There always seems to be something that we have questions about. But I am thankful that you're there, you're in place, you're out there, you're very aggressive. And I think for us here in County Council, that's a huge benefit.
I want to say thank you to you, and I want to say thank you to every member of council. We live on tips. We live on information, and we want to be responsive to what council is interested in and what the public is interested in. So we are not the all-knowing source of information, and so we really depend on everyone to come to us. So Councilwoman Simon and Councilman Hauser and Councilman Miller, let us know what you want us to look at, and we will absolutely take that seriously.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. That brings us to a close for the discussion items. Are there any miscellaneous business from council members? Looks like none. Is there any other public comment?
Yes, Madam Chair. First, Rich Raphael.
Madam Chair, members of council, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. Standing here at this moment is particularly special for me. I want to take an opportunity before I get into my remarks to once again thank Councilman Miller and the members of the Regional Transportation Advisory Subcommittee for the wonderful scope of the work that they have done, and also especially to council for their leadership and their insight in deciding to fold essentially that committee, that subcommittee into this committee so that we have a permanent standing home to deal with public transit related issues in this building. Thank you all so much for that, and we look forward to continuing the strong working rapport that we have with council in addressing these issues. I also want to publicly thank RTA for some of the positive things I heard in Mr. Calabrese's remarks today. The quarterly open house is something that we've been advocating for since December of 2015.
Good.
And we're glad to finally see that being put in place. We applaud the fact that there will be no further service cuts or fare hikes this year. And we also applaud the fact that RTA is taking the recommendations of our Fair Fares report very seriously. Those are all things that we put riders first, and we believe very strongly that riders should always come first in any of these kind of discussions. The one thing that still concerns me, however, is I don't hear too much talk of putting a sustainable local funding issue on the ballot. Now, let's face it, putting something on the ballot locally is not going to be popular with too much of any money, but Mr. Calabrese said it himself. It can't get much worse than this. A serious situation requires serious action. The RTA board has known of the pending loss of the MCO tax revenue for 18 months, and as far as we can tell, they have taken no action locally, and I emphasize locally, to get out in front of this thing, despite the fact that they have full statutory authority to put something on the ballot. So what we're saying, in the subcommittee's report, there was a list of things. Here, these are possible options that you could put on the ballot. We're saying, RTA, please pick one and put it on the ballot this year. And I cannot overemphasize the urgency of this. Once that temporary MCO tax relief is gone, there's no guarantees of anything. And in a state, ladies and gentlemen, where they've historically funded public transit at one of the 3 or 4 lowest levels in the country, we can't afford to wait to see who the next governor is going to be or whether or not they're going to care enough about public transit to fund it properly. We need to ask act now, and we're urging our RTA publicly to please consider getting something on the ballot this year. They have until August 6th. It's doable. I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very
Have a good
much, I
afternoon.
appreciate it.
Next is Lynn Solomon.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lynn Solomon. I live in Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm a regular RTA customer and writer. And I am a member of Clevelanders for Public Transit. And we want to thank you all for including public transit in this committee. Yes, the MCO tax was a great loss, but may I remind everyone that it was known that this was coming for 18 months, just like Rich mentioned. There needed to be some progressive thinking in how to make up for this before the actual loss came crashing down. In addition to the fact that everyone knows the state of Ohio barely funds public transit and has been doing this for years, year after year after year. So I'm asking, why do we keep going to the state expecting them to do something they have never wanted to do? We can't just wait on what may very well just be a pipe dream, that a new governor will come in and save the day and somehow get the state of Ohio to do an about-face and suddenly start funding public transit. We have to have reliable local funding now before it's too late. Clevelanders for Public Transit is asking for the RTA board to put a local transit funding initiative on the ballot this November. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Next is Dan McCarthy.
Hello, Madam Chair, fellow
Welcome.
council members. Thank you for this opportunity. I believe I submitted these with the clerk, so maybe you received your copies.
We do.
Very good. I did want to also echo my fellow commenters, just thanking you for having public transit have a home and a standing committee on county council. Obviously, RTA's main revenue source is a county sales tax, so this is definitely an important issue for the region, and also I would imagine the county would want to have a place to discuss issues. There are plenty of issues. Definitely, I think this is kind of a make or break year for the Regional Transit Authority in what its future outlook is going to be, and really for our region. I heard one part of Mr. Calabrese's statement that, it is one of the major cogs in economic development, and I agree with that, and I really hope council recognizes that fact. I've been writing RTA for 10 years. I have a degree in transit planning from the Levin College. I'm a current student and a Cleveland State student and at Martial Law, and I've been writing since 2000 and, it was probably 2008 when I started writing. I have seen over time, especially after the recession, there was major austerity that kind of had to happen. There was a huge budget hole, and this time reminds me of that time, 10 years now. We're kind of facing another crisis. What happened at that point was you saw some major fare increases that happened, you saw major service cuts that happened, and you saw ridership plummet, and you saw just kind of then a new status quo, where it was kind of a new plateau, and we haven't really ramped up back. There was some progress, but not enough. I just want you to have a perspective from a daily rider. Really, in this county, in this region, we're talking 60 to 75% of RTA riders. The income situation for people isn't so great. I heard Mr. Calabrese say that, now that they've frozen the fare hikes that were coming, which would have been catastrophic, they're going to look into maybe subsidizing low-income fares. We have a very complicated fare structure already in Cleveland for the RTA. I really urge a reassessment of that. I think the fares need to decrease. I've kind of become a broken record at public comment saying that we need to get back to a $5 for an all-day. We also need to see a return to transfers. I know that about 16% of RTA's funding comes from passenger fares. I imagine that when you're fudging with, the 50 cents here and there, that doesn't seem like a lot. You're trying to make your spreadsheets balance and all that. I understand that there's complicated modeling that goes into that. But really from the everyday rider, that exact change fare when you can't get change on the bus is huge. I really would like to see some policy that could help, maybe a subsidy to RTA, an addition from the county that could help us see a fare decrease. I think that would really, really majorly help. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for coming, giving your comments.
And the
Hopefully,
last speaker is Ms. Lou.
Good afternoon again. Well, actually, Cleveland and Cuyahoga County has been one of the older historical areas for the whole country. Once it was the top 10 cities, Cleveland, of the whole United States. Well, now we know lots of things have changed. Cleveland is not as big as before. However, keep losing populations, keep having all kinds of troubles. It's not really helping people. Now, Cuyahoga River can call itself on fire, but fortunately that doesn't happen all the time. But people need to go to school, people need to go to work, people need to go to see doctors. These things are way more important. And it happens every day, randomly in everybody's lives. However, due to the let's say 10 years ago, now not only we had a recession, before that we had a county corruption. Right now, lots of things got accumulated to the degree that you are the people, you have to be our heroes. Without mask, without cape, try to save the day. That's why it's important, for example, Inspector General, this office is trying to dig out some of the problems, get it fixed. However, for RTA's situation, through all the service costs through years, right now we have to use Lyft, for example, to help paratransit people. And unfortunately, from my observation and questioning, lots of people already became so passive. They are silent, and this economical and social segregation cannot continue. Because when public is silent and we are not doing anything about it, then that spiral will be more than just RTA. It will be the whole county. We should not allow this to happen, right? And you are here to help. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you for your comments. Good to know that RTA is holding quarterly open house meetings. That seems to be something that all parties wanted to see, and hopefully these issues will be vetted in that process. The next meeting will probably focus perhaps a little more on RTA, but we have the Charter Review Commission that will be front and center in our duty to make sure that we understand what it is that they're doing and eventually vote on what we believe will be going to council. If there's no other business, we are adjourned.